Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that Madison and Chelsea's relationship is about to be tested in a way neither of them could have prepared for. It all began innocently enough. After a string of complicated relationships and one particularly heartbreaking separation from Allison, Chelsea found unexpected peace with Madison. They had met at a small gallery opening downtown, shared a bottle of red wine, and spent the entire evening talking about art, heartbreak, and the strange in-between space of learning how to trust someone again. Madison was kind, steady, and unafraid to show affection. Chelsea, who had long built walls from past betrayals and whispered regrets, found herself lowering her guard for the first time in years. The two women quickly became inseparable. Long walks by the river turned into overnight stays. Laughs over coffee turned into whispered promises before bed. For a while, it felt like something real was finally forming, something lasting. But everything changed when Allison returned. She came back into town without warning. No calls. No letters. Just appeared one morning at the cafe Chelsea and Madison often frequented, wearing her old leather jacket and that smirk that always hovered somewhere between nostalgia and trouble. Chelsea spotted her from across the room and froze. Madison noticed. The awkward reunion that followed cracked something open. Allison was confrontational. She laughed too loud and made too many pointed references to the past. In particular, she didn't hesitate to recount her intimate history with Chelsea, sometimes with vivid detail and always in earshot of Madison. At first, Madison brushed it off. "She's obviously still not over you," Madison said one night, curling beside Chelsea on the couch. "She's lashing out. Ignore her." But Allison wasn't backing down. She inserted herself into their world with surgical precision, a passing comment here, an accidental run-in there. She made sure Madison knew that Chelsea had once called her the love of her life. That they had lived together. That they had promised each other forever. Chelsea tried to keep her distance. She reminded herself how toxic it had been with Allison. The jealousy. The screaming matches. The trust that crumbled like wet paper. But even she couldn't deny the emotional tug of memory, or how complicated it was to feel anger and longing simultaneously. Then the news came. Madison sat quietly on the edge of the bed one morning, eyes wide and blank, a pregnancy test in her trembling hand. Chelsea entered the room, still brushing her teeth, and stopped cold. Their eyes met. Everything after that happened in a blur. "You're pregnant." Madison nodded slowly. "I didn't know. Not until recently." Chelsea dropped the toothbrush. Her chest tightened. "Is it mine?" The question wasn't meant to be cruel. It was a defense. A reflex. Madison shook her head. "It was before you. Before I even knew who I was. Before I came out." Chelsea laughed sharp, bitter. "But it wasn't that long ago, was it?" Madison couldn't respond. Her silence said enough. Chelsea stormed out, her thoughts racing. She walked through the city, past the cafe, past the art gallery where it all started, trying to process what had just happened. In her mind, it wasn't just about the pregnancy. It was about trust. It was about the impossibility of ever feeling secure. If Madison had been with a man so recently, what was stopping it from happening again? Chelsea had built her entire identity around knowing who she was, around the confidence of being a lesbian in a world that often demanded she explain or justify it. She had fought too hard to be comfortable in her own skin. Now, with this revelation, it felt like the ground had shifted. Later that night, Chelsea returned. Madison was still sitting in the same spot, holding the test in her hand. "How far along are you?" 8 weeks, maybe 9. Chelsea did the math. That meant Madison had already been pregnant when they had first kissed. When they had made love for the first time. When she had told Chelsea she was all in. "Did you know when we started dating?" "No. I swear I didn't." Chelsea believed her. "But it didn't fix anything. Do you want to keep it?" Madison hesitated. "I don't know. I didn't plan for any of this." Chelsea sat down, exhausted. "Do you even know who the father is?" Madison nodded. "His name was Eric." It ended before it even really started. "I thought I had moved on. I had moved on. With you. Chelsea buried her face in her hands. But you didn't move far enough, did you? Madison reached for her. Chelsea flinched. I don't think I can do this, Chelsea whispered. Not with this between us. Madison blinked back tears. I didn't cheat on you. I didn't lie to you. You didn't tell me you were still figuring things out. You didn't tell me you were still leaving doors open behind you. Days passed in a fog. Chelsea moved out of their shared apartment. Allison, always lurking, found her within a week. Guess you finally saw her for what she really is, she said over drinks at a bar Chelsea never used to visit. They always go back. Chelsea looked at Allison. For a moment, the old chemistry flickered. But then she remembered the chaos. The way Allison weaponized vulnerability. The way she savored seeing other people fall apart. No, Chelsea said, standing up. They don't always go back. Sometimes they just go forward. She left the bar without another word. But forward wasn't a straight line. It was complicated. Madison was still pregnant. Chelsea still loved her. And none of the rules made sense anymore. What Chelsea didn't know was that Madison had been researching adoption. That she was meeting with counselors and writing in a journal every night about how much she missed Chelsea. That she had turned down a call from Eric, the father, because she didn't want to confuse things more. The story was far from over. But the fracture had begun. And neither woman knew if love could survive the weight of so many truths. Weeks passed in a haze of unspoken decisions and unanswered calls. Madison stayed in the apartment alone, curtains half drawn, ultrasound photos taped to the side of the fridge with weak magnets. Every room still smelled faintly of Chelsea's perfume. The toothbrush was still in the holder. Her mug still sat on the shelf. Madison hadn't touched any of it. Chelsea, meanwhile, bounced between her sister's couch and a rented room in a downtown hostel. She told herself the separation was final, that there was no way back. But each night, she found herself scrolling through old texts, rereading late-night messages that had once felt like promises. The anger had cooled, but the ache remained. The pregnancy wasn't just a complication. It was a reminder that the world Chelsea had tried to build with Madison was never hers alone. Then came the letter. Not a text. Not an email. A handwritten letter, placed in an envelope and slid beneath the door of the cafe where Chelsea had started working mornings. The handwriting was unmistakable. Madison's. It wasn't an apology. Not in the traditional sense. It was raw and vulnerable, admitting that she had been scared, that she had discovered the pregnancy after already falling for Chelsea, that she had convinced herself it would go away if she ignored it. But it didn't. And now, there was a life growing inside her. Madison didn't ask Chelsea to come back. She didn't ask for help. She only asked that Chelsea read the final line and believe it. I didn't lie about loving you. That's the only thing I'm sure I got right. Chelsea folded the letter carefully and placed it in her jacket pocket. That night, she didn't sleep. Across town, Allison hadn't gone anywhere. She was still lingering. Still circling. She had seen Madison leaving a clinic a few days earlier and followed her at a distance. Watching her enter a support group meeting for young expectant mothers stung more than she expected. In her mind, Allison still believed Chelsea belonged to her. Madison was just a phase. A disruption. A mistake that would self-destruct. And Allison was ready to pick up the pieces. But the longer Chelsea stayed away, the more uncertain Allison became. She sent a message. A single line. You know I wouldn't have left you alone with this. Chelsea never replied. At her next doctor appointment, Madison sat alone in the waiting room, clutching her file with shaking hands. She had made her choice. She would carry the pregnancy to term, but she wouldn't raise the child. She had signed up for a closed adoption through an agency in a neighboring city. She wanted a clean break for the baby, and for herself. But something happened during the scan. As the technician turned the monitor toward her, Madison saw a tiny hand twitch on screen. The shape of a nose. A flickering heartbeat. It wasn't just a collection of cells anymore. It was a future. Her chest tightened, and she cried silently, gripping the paper sheet beneath her thighs. That night, she called the adoption counselor and asked to postpone the paperwork. A week later, Chelsea returned to the apartment. She didn't knock. She still had a key. Madison was on the couch, half asleep, when she heard the door creak. They stared at each other for a long time. "You kept my mug," Chelsea said. Madison nodded. "I couldn't throw it away." Chelsea sat down beside her. There were no accusations, no dramatic outbursts. Just silence. Then, finally, "Do you still want this?" "Us." Madison wiped her face. "More than anything. But I can't promise it'll be simple." "Nothing ever is." They talked for hours. About the baby. About fear. About Allison's return. Madison admitted she still didn't know what kind of mother she would be, or if she even wanted to be one. Chelsea listened, and for the first time, saw beyond her own pain. This wasn't betrayal. It was confusion. Chaos. Life. Allison made one final attempt. She appeared at the apartment building 2 days later, flowers in hand, nostalgia in her eyes. Chelsea opened the door, saw her, and sighed. "I don't want this anymore," Chelsea said. "I don't want the past pretending to be the future." Allison said nothing. She placed the flowers on the floor and walked away. When the baby was born 4 months later, Chelsea was in the hospital room. Madison held her hand through the delivery. The Childa girl was placed on Madison's chest, eyes wide, lungs screaming. They named her Lila. Madison decided to keep her. Chelsea stayed. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Their love didn't return to what it had been. It became something else, sharper, weathered, more honest. A partnership shaped not by perfection but by survival. And for the first time in her life, Chelsea understood that being queer didn't mean living within rigid borders. It meant redefining home, over and over, with the people who choose you back. Together, they chose each other again. Lila was 6 months old when the next storm hit. Not a literal one, though the autumn winds were beginning to pull leaves from the trees with fierce, bone-deep chill, but a storm of history. The kind Chelsea had always feared would find them again. Allison had disappeared after her last visit. Or so Chelsea thought. But Allison wasn't gone. She had simply changed strategies. Unbeknownst to Madison and Chelsea, Allison had quietly petitioned for parental inquiry into Lila's birth. She did so under the guise of a distant relative via fabricated identity forged from a scrap of Madison's old online life, digging through usernames, photos, digital fingerprints no one thought twice about. Her purpose wasn't legal custody or visitation rights. It was exposure. Chaos. She had learned that pain doesn't always have to scream. Sometimes it only has to whisper at the right moment. The letter came in the mail. Official, sealed, with a court insignia that immediately turned Chelsea's stomach. Madison opened it, expecting another bill or maybe a hospital follow-up. Instead, she froze. "There's a motion," she said. "Filed in family court. Someone wants a hearing." Chelsea read the letter twice. Then a third time. "She used your old name. The one from your college records." That's how she got in. Madison dropped the paper. How did she even know about it? Chelsea didn't answer. She already knew. Allison had always been a collector of secrets. Quiet. Patient. Waiting until those secrets were needed. She had found something that made her relevant again. Their attorney advised them not to panic, but panic seeped in anyway. The thought of someone like Allison having even a legal whisper of connection to Lila sent shivers through them both. Madison began waking up at 2 a.m. to check the locks. Chelsea started sleeping with her phone clutched in her palm. Lila sensed the tension and began crying more often at night. The hearing date was set for mid-November. Chelsea returned to therapy. She hadn't gone since the breakup with Allison, but now she sat on the familiar couch, hands clenched together, talking about safety. About control. About how every time she felt secure, it felt like someone pulled the floor out from under her. "I want to believe we can protect her," Chelsea said. "But what if love isn't enough?" The therapist replied, "Then you build something bigger than love. You build truth. Boundaries. Action. In the weeks leading up to the hearing, Madison contacted Eric, the biological father. He had moved to another state and hadn't known about the pregnancy until Madison reached out. His response was swift, kind, and clear. He didn't want involvement. He was engaged, planning a life elsewhere. But he agreed to file an affidavit to support Madison's custody claim, denying any desire for parenting rights. Chelsea, reading the document, felt an unexpected twist of something like grief. A goodbye to a part of the story that would never fully belong to her, even if she had accepted Lila with all her heart. Meanwhile, Allison moved deeper into manipulation. She sent anonymous emails to Madison's employer questioning her stability. She mailed printed photos from Chelsea's social media accounts to Chelsea's parents with scrawled notes like, "Is this the life you imagined for your daughter?" When the court date arrived, it rained. The sky was gray, heavy with unshed storm clouds. Madison wore black. Chelsea held her hand from the courthouse steps all the way to the courtroom bench. Allison arrived late. Her lawyer, a slick man with 2 white teeth, spoke first, weaving a narrative of instability, concealed relationships, and unfit parenting environments. Madison's past relationship history was dragged into the spotlight. Chelsea's work in a local LGBTQ+ community center was painted as radical, even dangerous. Madison remained composed. Chelsea nearly broke. But then Madison took the stand. Her voice didn't shake. She spoke of growth, of rediscovery, of what it meant to realize you were queer in a world that punished you for not knowing sooner. She talked about the moment she first held Lila and how she realized everything had changed. Not because she had to prove herself, but because she finally understood who she was. Chelsea watched her with awe. The judge listened. Allison was called to the stand last. She was combative, bitter. She tried to paint herself as the aggrieved party, the one who had been cast aside. But it was clear she had no relationship to Lila. No legitimate claim. No moral authority. In her closing remarks, the judge made it clear there was no merit to the claim. Allison's petition was denied. A permanent protective order was granted. After court, Chelsea and Madison took Lila home. But things had changed. Love had survived. But it had aged. Hardened. The edges were rougher now. Chelsea no longer lived in fear of Madison leaving. And Madison no longer felt like she had to hide anything from Chelsea. They talked more. Fought cleaner. Laughed louder. They started looking at preschools. They started talking about another child. One night, after Lila had fallen asleep on the living room floor surrounded by her picture books, Chelsea looked at Madison and said, "I still don't know what kind of family we are. But I know I never want to build it with anyone else." Madison kissed her, smiling. "We're the kind that chooses each other. Every day. Even when it's hard." In a nearby apartment across town, Allison packed her bags. She was leaving for good this time. The court had shut her down. The town had stopped whispering. Even the anger had started to dull. But before she left, she took one last look at a photo of her and Chelsea from years ago. She slipped it into her bag. And vanished. Chelsea never heard from her again. Years later, Lila would ask how her moms met. Chelsea would smile, lean down, and whisper in the middle of a beautiful mess. "But we cleaned it up. And then we stayed." And Lila would nod, not needing to understand all of it. Only that love had been hard. But real.